Let's go to London and speak to the Latin America analyst, Javier Farje. Javier, great to see you. Can Cuba survive this? Can Cuba survive this crisis? I mean, the energy crisis has been going on, according to some, for at least 6 years now, but now it's really, really biting.
It's really bad because they can no longer get the supplies of oil that used to come from Venezuela, especially after Maduro was arrested or detained or kidnapped, whatever you want to call it. It actually had to stop before that because Venezuela couldn't afford to send cheap oil to Cuba. The other thing is that countries which want to help, like Russia, for example, and China, have been prevented by the United States from doing so. In the case of Mexico, Mexico is the only country in Latin America that's prepared to help Cuba. They never broke relations with Cuba after the 1959 revolution, and they've always tried to help Cuba, but they are torn. The government of Mexico is torn between pleasing Trump and trying not to get more threats from him and helping Cuba. And some diplomats suggest that this is worse than the so-called special period, which was in the mid-1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The economy in Cuba almost collapsed, but they managed to recover. This is much worse. And what you can add to this situation is the fact that many countries which already invest in Cuba, in particular Spain, in the tourist industry, they can no longer operate because there's no energy. There's load sheddings, a lot of blackouts, and they have to send their workers to work from home. And the tourist industry, which constitutes a great deal of the income that Cuba gets of hard currency, cannot operate because of that situation. It's really, really bad. And of course, this complete embargo started in January, after the fall of Maduro, and this is very, very bad. I mean, it's been going on, as you say, for a few years now, but it's going to be made worse because of the lack of supplies of oil that used to come from Venezuela and can no longer go there.
What does this White House have against Cuba, or is this an old Cold War mentality from Donald Trump? I mean, clearly his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he's a former, what do we call him? A refugee or someone who left Cuba to now live in the United States. So he has a particular dislike of his motherland.
Well, first of all, his parents left Cuba during the Batista regime. They didn't live during the Cuban Revolution. He's not a refugee from the Cuban Revolution. His parents were refugees from the Batista dictatorship, which was defeated by the 1959 Cuban Revolution. So that's very important to establish that. But Marco Rubio is against invading Cuba. He's made it very clear more than once that we are not going to change anything in Cuba. He's had the same situation with the same position with Venezuela, because he knows that there will be a flood of refugees from Cuba, which would actually go against the policies that Trump has of getting rid of all immigrants in Cuba. So this could create a massive, huge exodus of refugees, Cuban refugees, towards the United States, and Trump cannot afford that. Now, Trump has said that Cuba constitutes some kind of like amorphous threat of terrorism and instability. A country in economic crisis where people can hardly afford to eat can hardly be a threat to the United States of America. So that amorphous threat that Cuba constitutes seems to be a hangover from the old Cold War. During the Obama regime, the government, there was an openness with Cuba. They opened the embassy and all that. But of course, everything has collapsed since Trump came to power the first time, and then now even worse. But I don't understand what kind of threat Cuba constitutes to the United States, because Cuba can hardly afford to survive. So this could be very bad unless, and now Trump said that Cubans were ready to make an agreement. I would imagine that the agreement means to open the economy. 90% of the economy is still controlled by the government, by the state, and there was a small openness in the 2000s, but never enough to sort of free some of the market values that Cuba has. So it's very, very bad because the countries that are already invested in Cuba can no longer operate there.
Javier Farje, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Adnan.